Welcome to the replay. We're in El Cerrito. See if anybody comes on. Anybody a John Fogerty fan? There we go. Hey, Mark. A John Fogerty fan. You might be the one and only, but this is worthwhile because there's a replay, and I think some people are going to be interested. So we're in El Cerrito, California. This is the San Francisco Bay Area. This is the East Bay. This is John Fogerty and Tom Fogerty's first home. Hi. Hey, stay with me because I'm going to do a whole neighborhood walk through here and show you where he grew up if you're a John Fogerty fan. But I'm kind of thinking most people are going to be watching this on the replay. So I just read his autobiography, John Fogerty's autobiography called Fortunate Son, named after one of his songs. And he talks about this neighborhood. He talks about El Cerrito and how much he really loved growing up here in this small community. Hey, Coverfly. So I got two people. Hey, I'm going to do this whole tour. So John Fogerty's haunts. He lived here until he was 40 years old. He was born in Berkeley, which is right next door almost. We got Albany and then Berkeley south of here. And he grew up in this home. This is the first home he grew up in until he moved to his house in Ramona. We're going to walk over to Ramona as well. But this is on Eureka in El Cerrito, California. This is the first house he grew up in from when he was born in May 28, 1945 until about early 1950s, so about 54. He's probably 8 or 9 years old when he moved over to the house on Ramona. He lived across the street from the El Cerrito High School. So I'm going to pan over and show you. This is the renovated, this is the new high school, but he grew up while this old high school was being built. And in his book, he talks about playing while it was being built and how he, a little boy, he actually climbed up into these structures that really were quite dangerous. But I'm going to start walking. A little bit of a walk, but you can see if you read his book a description of some of the places we're going to see. But again, that's his first childhood home here on Eureka in El Cerrito, California. You can see it's just a middle class neighborhood, working class probably back after World War II, because all these houses most of them were built after World War II. These guys coming out of the war on the GI Bill, go back to school, get jobs, and get homes to raise their families. John's father was a linotype operator, which means he worked on a newspaper working on the type, which is kind of coincidental because that's exactly what my dad did here in the Bay Area. They didn't work together, but who knows, maybe they knew each other. My dad worked for the Oakland Tribune. John's dad worked for the Berkeley Gazette. So this is a new El Cerrito High. My wife went to school here. My daughters went to school here. So it tells you about my roots here in the East Bay. I also grew up in the East Bay, but not in El Cerrito like my children and my wife did. Anybody got any questions? I just read this book. I know everything you need to know about John Fogerty and Creedence Clearwater Revival. So they met, Stu Cook, Doug Clifford met over at Portola. I should tell you, Portola is junior high. It's over here. We're not going to go there because now it's just a big empty lot. They tore it down because it wasn't earthquake proof a few years ago. But they met at Portola and they started a group, not with Tom, but John and Doug and Stu, called the Blue Velvets. It was just a little garage band. But it started getting some notice, and then later Tom joined, and they actually started getting some notice and making some records. And Fantasy Records signed them up with Saul Zaentz, if you know that story. Here's the ball fields. over here. So the Sulzan signs them up and makes their name the Gollywogs, because that was the British invasion, and they wanted a group that would be like a British group. And they made a few records, but they didn't really go anywhere. Sulzan's got the members of the band to sign these nefarious contracts that basically took all their rights away. Their copyrights and the royalties. So they got screwed royally, especially John. And if you know the story, over the years there's been so many lawsuits you can't even count them all. So I'm kind of walking quick here by the football field, because in about 2 blocks we're going to see John's grammar school, his elementary school where he went to school. It shows you how this neighborhood here is very small for him, because he could walk everywhere. He could walk to the stores, he could walk to school, he could walk over to Solano Avenue to Ortman's. It used to be the favorite ice cream shop around here, even when I was here, but unfortunately it's no longer there. Feel free to ask questions, because I'll just talk on and on about John Fogerty growing up here. So anyway, he went to El Cerrito High here, which is where we just passed. And hey, Russia, hope you're a Creedence fan. I know there's a lot of European, especially Northern European, who just love Creedence Clearwater. They have a convention, I believe, up in Norway every year. Most people think Creedence Clearwater Revival is from the South. John even talks about his music being swamp music. But nope. I'll show you this. Right through there is the bay. You can see the bay through there, but it's kind of cloudy today because we're in the East Bay. So, no, I was in St. Petersburg though in September. My wife and I did a Northern European trip that we scoped, and we are just in St. Petersburg. We love St. Petersburg. We were just talking about it last night. The people there are so nice, and the food was fantastic. And for Americans right now, real cheap. So anyway, he didn't grow up in the South. He grew up right here in San Francisco Bay Area, in the East Bay, across the bay. And El Cerrito, California, back then, still is. It's kind of a small little community town. Everybody kind of knows one another. And that's the town that John Fogerty and the Fogerty brothers grew up in. So you can see we walked from El Cerrito High. We walked from his first house. You can see this on replay if you haven't seen it. Walked from the first house he grew up in, and we're going to be walking to the next house where he lived until he was almost an adult. His parents were divorced. That had quite an impact on us growing up. You can read about that. Again, I read his autobiography just the other day. So here's the elementary school he went to. It's called Harding School, and they've renovated it so it doesn't look the way it used to, but it's still in the same place. Yeah, Silicon Valley, it's not far. So this is Harding Elementary. He loved going to school here. He was on the traffic patrol. He would do after school, before school, he'd be out here on this four-way intersection doing the traffic patrol. He talked about his like of a local police officer who was his superior, and one time he came screaming down this hill on his bicycle, 20 miles an hour, ran this red light, and the officer really just shook his head at him. He felt really bad. I love that story. Wait. So you can see right out here would be the Golden Gate, and over here would be Mount Tam. So we're right on the edge of the bay in the East Bay here. When the local paper did a interview with John for his book. They asked him about his favorite memory here in El Cerrito growing up, and he talked about riding on this street on Fairmont Avenue as his favorite memory. And it's funny because if you see that sign up there, it's spelled, no, you can't see it, it's spelled Fairmount. But El Cerrito's funny. We have a lot of street names that we don't say phonetically, so we call it Fairmont. I don't know the history of that, but that's what everybody calls it, not Fairmount, but Fairmont. It's kind of funny. So we're about 2 blocks away from Ramona, which is a street that he really grew up on in his real formative years. This is kind of school time, so there's a lot of traffic this morning. So he talked about growing up in this neighborhood, how he could just walk to the store, and I'll show you the little store that's used to be up here where he could just go buy an apple for a nickel. He could walk over to Albany, probably over to not too far at Solano Avenue, to go to Ortman's, get ice cream. And he talked about seeing a bottle of syrup that you could buy fizzy drinks with. And the bottle of syrup, the brand name was called Green River. Yeah, and Tom Fogerty too. There actually are 5 Fogerty brothers, believe it or not. That was a household. So one of his famous songs, first songs, was called Green River, named after that syrup that you'd make fizzy drinks with. It's always interesting to learn the history about people and how they make decisions about things. So we're going a little bit uphill. That way we can actually see a little bit more. El Cerrito is known for hills, the East Bay Hills. And if you've seen in my scopes, I've done some scopes recently from the East Bay Hills, because you have a beautiful view of the whole bay, from San Francisco and Oakland and Mount Tamalpais. It's just gorgeous. El Cerrito is a really great community to live in. Again, you're really part of the community. So here, not far from where John lived, he could just walk 2 blocks to this little set of stores here. And he talked about the beauty shop that's still here. And he talked about going to the grocery store. Oh, right. That's what I wanted. I want the fans to see this, because who comes to El Cerrito, for heaven's sakes? El Cerrito, California. Who knew that CCR was from East Bay, California? So this was the old grocery store. Even when I first moved here, this was a grocery store. But now it's a restaurant called Fat Apples. That's a whole nother story, but it's a great little restaurant. If you ever come to El Cerrito and you want to just do the same walk, come here and have lunch. It's a really great place. He talks about riding his bicycle around Sunset Cemetery that's right up here. And again, the local connection. I have a great-grandmother who's buried there. So you can see my connection to this community. Even though I didn't grow up here, my dad was born and raised in Berkeley. And Berkeley, Albany, El Cerrito. Oh, that's great. I'm glad to hear that. So I have a real connection to this community. It actually, this is kind of an aside, but the Washington Post this week just printed the 10 most liberal cities in the United States. And El Cerrito is number 10, Albany next door is number 9, and Berkeley next door to that is number 7 as you go south. So we're really a liberal bastion here in a conservative country, really. Most of the country's conservative except on the coast, East Coast, West Coast, and then everything interior is pretty conservative, which is kind of interesting. Oh, I'm sorry, is my finger getting in the way? I'm sorry, I apologize, my finger is in the way. Oh, it's 11. Oh, that's great. So this is Ramona. This is the street that John and his brothers lived, the second house they lived on. He moved here probably when he was 8 or 9. He lived here, I think, until his mom booted him out when he was ready to get married, like he was like 18 or 19. His mom was ready for him to go. He actually, by the way, his first high school was a Catholic school in Berkeley called St. Mary's, but boy, that was just oil and vinegar. They did oil and vinegar, water and oil. Didn't it wasn't a match. So he went to El Cerrito, loved El Cerrito right from the get-go, because there's more to his style of learning and the rigidity of learning from the nuns. So you can see he could ride his bike all over the place. He could walk all over the place. He worked at a gas station not far from here. There's a song, I can't remember which song, but it talks about pumping gas. That song's about him. It says, I worked in Memphis and then down and pumped gasoline or something in New Orleans. Well, it was really here in El Cerrito that which is kind of cool. So it's about 2 blocks, so I think I'm going to be coming to it pretty quick. And I'll scope that, and then I'll say goodbye because it's getting too long. Oh yeah, El Cerrito is a real quiet little town, right across the bay. You just go up the hills just a little bit, you can see San Francisco, no problem. So here's the house. Yeah, a lot of people do come from Europe, believe it or not. There's nothing organized here, though. You're welcome. So that's the house here. I'll get you the better angle. It's really quite dilapidated. I think it's a rental, but this is the house. I'm not even sure if anybody lives here, to be honest. So that's the house. So John's bedroom was right here. And he describes in his book, there used to be a drive-in movie theater. He called it Motor Movies. And I'll show you. Right over here, there's the plaza, which is now a shopping area. But there used to be a drive-in movie theater there. And from that window right there, he could be on his bunk bed, in bed, and watch the drive-in movie. And his mom never really knew about it. But he just loved watching all these scary monster movies from the 50s, which, you know, what moms let their kids watch monster movies back then. So this is his second home growing up. And from here he got married to his first wife, moved to Albany, which is right next door to an apartment. He lived here in El Cerrito till 1986, till he was 40 years old. I wasn't even aware of that, because I never saw him when he was here. Because I moved here in El Cerrito in 82, so I never saw him. And he went to the same restaurants, same theaters, same Capwell's, department store, but I never saw him. So anyway, that's the quick little neighborhood tour. I hope that a lot of people will watch this on replay. Tell your friends, if you're a CCR fan, that this is our little tour of El Cerrito. And I really appreciate you guys watching. And I post from time to time. Usually we do, my wife and I, Leslie and Nick, we do travels together. And we're planning a trip in April to New Orleans, Savannah, and Charleston, South Carolina, and then after that we're going to go to Spain. So I'll be scoping those places. So if you want to follow, if you like see places around the world, that's kind of what we do. But today it's just here, me at home in El Cerrito, showing you a little bit of history. We don't have too many famous people from El Cerrito, but here it is, the John Fogerty, Creedence Clearwater Revival. So thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks a lot.